The problem with security is that it clashes with liberty, with our freedom. You cannot have freedom and security at the same time. There are two opposites. So we have to make a choice. So people, what they do is they try to have both. So they, move themselves like roughly in the middle of this line of this continuum that on one side you have security and on the other one you have freedom. But at some point you have to decide if you want security or if you want freedom. What the fact is, you cannot have both. That's the truth. So the more you move away from security, the more you move toward freedom. The more you move away from freedom, the more you go towards security. That's how it works. Well, we talk a lot about ego. Okay, people start to understand that ego is a very essential part of our existence. We did not talk about ego so much, even say 20 or 30 years ago. But the more we go on in time, the more we are aware of this, what can we call it? Entity? I don't know what to call it. Unfortunately, we do not talk very well about our ego. We do not have a very defined idea of what our ego is, starting from the fact that ego comes from the Latin I, me, right? So ego is about us, and it defines us, which it makes us believe that we are a separate entity from all the rest of the world. There's only us. Now, this has given a very negative image to ego, but that's not all there is to it. We must understand that the ego exists because it has a very specific role, a very specific purpose, a function, and we must understand what that is. Otherwise, we're going to end up talking about our ego in a very moralistic way. We do not want that. There has been so much saying about, that ego is bad. We have to repress the ego. We should want to have nothing to do with it. No, we have to deal with our ego. We have to interact with our ego, but we have to know how it works, and we have to know what it wants, most importantly. So, there was a saying that there is still this saying that the greatest deception of the devil is to make us believe that it doesn't exist. And the same thing goes with our ego. Our ego does not want us to know that it exists. And that's why when people tell us that we are egoists, that we are on an ego trip and stuff like that, going, what are you talking about? I don't have an ego. Okay, you have an ego, not me. That's the deception. So we must understand, we should not be afraid, we should not be ashamed of having an ego. Okay, because without an ego, we would have no desires. We would be just like, I don't know, little animals, not even that, not even microbes. We wouldn't have desires, we wouldn't have drives, we wouldn't have nothing. Perhaps we wouldn't even have love in a certain type of love, not the absolute love. So it is important, but we have to learn how to deal with it, how to interact with it, because otherwise it can destroy us. That's the bad part. But it's like a car, like a wild horse. Okay, you have to be careful. Of course, you have to be careful. But wild horses are phenomenal. Big, strong cars, like fast cars, beautiful cars. Okay, of course they're dangerous. But you don't say, I don't want it because it could be dangerous, because I may have an accident. You have to learn how to drive them. Same thing goes with our ego. Now, depending on the context in which we use the word ego, it has a different meaning, a different connotation. For example, in psychology, it defines, the development of the human being. The ego is behind our development, our interior development, our psychological development. In spirituality, as I said, the ego is our enemy. And in some disciplines, spiritual disciplines, we have to destroy it. We have to repress it. Like I said, I don't agree with that. We must know that it exists. We must know that it may hurt us and others. But it is not bad in itself, because otherwise we would not survive. There wouldn't be any life on Earth. There would probably that it couldn't there could even be a universe without an ego, because yes, even the universe has an ego. Okay, I'm not getting into that, but even a blade of grass grows because of the ego, because the ego tells the seed that it has to sprout and that it has to go up so that it can go towards the sun, and the roots must go down in the earth so that it can take all the elements, all the minerals that it needs. That's ego. Okay, so that's why it's important that we know what we do with it. We can I'm talking here about the ego as I call it a primeval biological program. Why do I call it that way? Because it is primeval. It's been existing from the beginning of life. It is biological, even though not necessarily or strictly biological, but as far as we're concerned, it is. And it is a program. It is programmed for one thing and one thing only: the survival of the individual that it governs, and the survival of the species which that individual belongs to. That's what its purpose is. So we can't blame it because it does what it's been created for, or it has formed for. We can't blame it. So we have to learn how to use it. There are 5 conditions, and these are very important because once you know these conditions, you know what our ego wants from us exactly. Not only that, when and in which situations it wants certain things from us. The first and foremost, the strongest condition for our ego is tranquility. We all want tranquility. We do not want to have hassles, problems. Who wants those? That's our ego. When we have a hassle, or we have a problem, or we have a conflict, our ego goes berserk. You have to get out of that situation. You want tranquility. You know what the dream, the greatest dream of our ego is? That we would be like a mummy, all tied up inside a sarcophagus, where nothing can happen to us. That's the ideal condition for our ego. Of course, we cannot do that. So, the ego has to accept that, but that would be perfect for him. Ego doesn't care about our happiness. That's not his business. It's our business. That's where we clash with the ego. What the ego wants is something else, which we most of the time confuse with happiness, but which is not. I'm going to talk about that in a second, in a while. Okay, so let's start from tranquility. Okay, we want tranquility. Okay, we do not have a hustle. We want to have the money that we need to survive or to have a good life. We want, security. We want a home. We want a family. Very often, our family for us is a source of security and tranquility, because we have somewhere to go to, which is not how we should relate with our family. We should be the one that gives tranquility, especially the men that should want tranquility to our family. But it's just the opposite. So we can't stay in that state all the time, however, because we have to do something to keep that tranquility. Because how long can you stay still and serene if you have problems coming up, if you don't do anything, if you don't work, for example? So we have to go to work, or we have to do something to keep our tranquility. And so that where security, that's the second condition that steps in, which is not the same as tranquility. Tranquility is a state. Security is a sense of, how can I say, it's something that we feel that will enable us to keep our tranquility. So that's very, very important. The problem with security is that it clashes with liberty, with our freedom. You cannot have freedom and security at the same time. There are two opposites. So we have to make a choice. So people, what they do is they try to have both. So they, move themselves like roughly in the middle of this line, of this continuum, that on one side you have security and on the other one you have freedom. But at some point you have to decide if you want security or if you want freedom. The fact is you cannot have both. That's the truth. So the more you move away from security, the more you move toward freedom. The more you move away from freedom, the more you go towards security. That's how it works. The third thing is the thing I was talking to you about before, that we confuse or we mix up with happiness, and that is gratification. That is a tragic mistake that we want. Like I said, our ego does not care if we're happy. It's not its business. It's not what it's been created for. It's not what it's here for. Not for our happiness. We are responsible for our happiness. You know, how happy can you be in the jail of security, for example? We will be happy if we're free. We will never be happy if we are in a state of security. And even if you step up to gratification, okay, it's still very much under very specific conditions. Okay, gratification is what we want, like money, luxury, great life, uh, big house, a villa, a lot of money to fly around the world to do whatever you want. Okay, that enables you to gratify yourself. But gratification is something very, it's something that disappears the minute you gratify yourself. Now, for example, you want to have go to a restaurant to have a good meal. You really crave you have the special restaurant you want to go to so that you can have this great meal with your family or friends or whatever. And once you've eaten it up, it's gone. You do not have more pleasure because of that. You've eaten, so you have gratified yourself. Your stomach is full. You want no more of it. Happiness does not work that way. There's never too much happiness. Okay, you will want to, happiness is a state where you can feel always, all the time happy, which has got nothing to do with gratification. So many people intend to reach happiness by being continuously gratified, but it doesn't work. And in fact, it takes you away from happiness. So that doesn't work. Anyway, it's important. It's in the middle, right? It's the third out of five. So that's the middle point. From then on, it's not so, how can I say, it's not as urgent to feel as it is, for example, for tranquility or security. That you have to feel. You must feel tranquil, peace and serene and secure as long as possible. And then you step up to the fourth condition, which is acknowledgement. We need to be acknowledged. We need to be appraised. We need to be considered and accepted and welcome. It's important for us to know that we are in the minds and hearts of other people. Not because the ego wants that. It doesn't like that at all. But the problem is that we are social animals. And we need others to survive. I mean, look, if you want to eat, if you want to be gratified, if you want to have money, if you want to be secure, you have to go to work, for example, right? And you need to have an employment. So you need to look for a company which is made of people. You have to talk to the CEO or the HR or whatever in order to be hired. So you need to interact with people. Or if you're on your own, you have to find customers. We cannot live on our own. So it's a necessity that the ego has to accept. But it tells you, okay, get as much as you can from that person that will gratify you, that will make you feel more secure, but don't be connected to that person. Okay, stay away from that person. Remember, ego means I. There's just me in this world. All the other people are just for me to use. That's it. I don't want to feel connected with that. And if you remember from my last podcast, when I talked about the wars, where I was saying that on one side you have the ego, and on the other side you have the desire to connect, right? So they're not compatible. Okay, because if you desire to connect with other people, you cannot feel the urge of the ego. And the ego does not want to have anything to do with others. So we have to manage these two things because we need both, actually. So we need to find a balance, not a compromise, remember, from the other session or the other podcast, but we have to step up to a state of synthesis. And finally, the fifth condition is aligning with your values. Values alignment is crucial. It's the last bastion for our ego, because after that, if you go through that, it will no longer have control over you. So, and that's the strongest bastion. Once you get to value alignment, that's where the real stuff comes in. Because remember, all disputes, all conflicts come as a result of value misalignment. Why do you fight? Because you have values, right? And values are the things that are important for you. And when you see that somebody else is breaching a value that for you is important, you're going to have a conflict with that person, no matter how close that person is to you. It could be even our spouse or our children or our parents. Now, values change in life. Okay. So, but you have to keep up with those values and you expect other people to do the same, not with their values. You don't care about their values. You just want and expect people to respect your values. That's where the problems come. So we have to go beyond that. We have to understand and we must communicate and we must have a true, profound, and deep dialogue where you can get over the conflict by accepting that other people have values that are not the same as yours, and still you respect them. To a certain degree, respect is more important than love, because you can love a person, but if there's a value clash between the two of you, he's going to hate you. So it disappears. Love disappears in an instant. But if you have respect, this is what really makes the relationship strong, not love. Love can disappear in a moment, unfortunately. Okay, so this is I give you a view or an overview of these 5 conditions, because I believe that when you're aware of these 5 conditions that your ego wants to have observed, strictly observed, otherwise it's going to go berserk. And you're going to feel conflict inside of you. That's your ego working on you and say, hey, give me tranquility, give me security, give me gratification, give me acknowledgement, give me value alignment. Otherwise, I'm going to make your life miserable. That's our ego's job. So you have to act in a way where you're not going to allow your ego to decide how happy and how great your life is going to be. You cannot allow that. You're in charge of your life, not your ego. See you next time.